Thank you for joining the Keen Intuition podcast, and welcome to my stream of thought, where I intend to bring various topics into the discussions that we have here, and they can vary from culture, politics, sports, science, even nature, anything that comes up that might be relevant or that might be topical. My intent is to kind of get to the root of certain matters without just relying on things I see online, on the interwebs, on social media, or even on news stations, which I keep on in the background during most of my day, because I want to get my own understanding of the things that are going on and not just be led by what other people say. And that's one of the main reasons behind this podcast. And now, since this is the first show, I don't want to over or underwhelm the people that might be tuning in. So I'll start it off with an admission and then a request that will come after the break. But before I get to the break, just a little bit about myself. I like walks on the beach. I like strawberry. No, I'm just playing. I like to. I have a pretty analytical mind at some points. Some might say over analytical, and I do tend to get a little extra wordy at points. And that's just how my nature is. Like, I like to speak in metaphor. I like to look deeper into certain topics. I like to not necessarily take everything at face value all the time. So, I want to bring that out to all of y'all, because I know a lot of y'all are kind of thinking some of the same things, and y'all probably also, like me, get tired of seeing what other people say or hearing what other people say all the time, because first of all, it's not healthy to be a 100% follower. And sometimes you just want to talk through things sometimes. And this is a place where you can do that. This is where a place where we welcome all streams of thought. I'm not inviting a bunch of dumb mess, although sometimes dumb mess needs to be talked through, just like stuff that we don't think is dumb. So I don't want to get to the point where I end up having a bunch of pettiness, or to have a bunch of tribalism like politics is today, or not even politics, but how many times have you seen somebody call a person commenting on something a LeBron stan or a Jordan stan or whatever the case is. That's what we want to get away from. But sometimes we realize we have to talk through that stuff as well. So again, that's part of what I'm out for, and part of what my intent is within this particular podcast and the discussions that we have. Now, again, I want to be able to talk through things, and it can't just be a keenocracy, keen intuition, keenocracy. Anyway, it can't just be my opinion all the time. Sometimes we will have guests on the show, so we can kind of, I don't want to say debate, but more so discuss things. And if it is a debate, then hopefully everybody has good points to share, so that we can, again, further any kind of points of discussion. So that's just a little bit of an intro, just to bring a little bit more about myself in. I'm not going to give my age or anything like that, but let's just say I'm an adult. As you can tell, I have gray hairs and all that kind of stuff. I've been through college. I have a couple degrees. I'm not considering myself like a political scientist or anything like that. I actually have a film degree of all things, but that does not mean that I'm not able to put together thoughts. In fact, I probably can put together a little bit of thought and things like that because of that. And in fact, that's probably why I speak in metaphor a lot, because a lot of entertainers and writers and things of that nature, that's kind of how they do things. They want to make things understandable in a way that's more easily digestible, especially if it's a deep and intricate topic. And then we speak through metaphor in order to make it make sense to people, instead of just speaking in, how they say developers speak for computers, or industry speak for banking, or whatever the case is. So one thing I'm catching myself with now too is I do talk with my hands sometimes, so you'll see a lot of this throughout our journey into these discussions. So, anyways, that's a little introduction about me so far. Additionally, I live within the state of Georgia, outside of the Atlanta area, but I grew up in Southern California, and I was born outside of Michigan, outside of Detroit. I'm sorry, in Michigan. So I have a lot of different places and different groups of people to draw upon for my opinions and through my experiences. So I bring all of that into these discussions and the rest of my family. So, um, yeah. So with that said, we're going to take a quick break, and when I come back from the break, I'll get into that admission and to the request. So again, we'll be right back. With the King Intuition. With the King Intuition. So a little bit more on the theme of about me. I went to college at Georgia State University uh, for my bachelor, but before that, I went to Antelope Valley College in California, Southern California. Um, I do, I am into sports. Um, go Tigers, go, who's, they're in the playoffs now. Go Lions, go Pistons, go Red Wings when I watch hockey. But also go Michigan and Michigan State, but also go Georgia State because I went to Georgia State. But I grew up as a fan of all those other teams. Yeah, so again, I probably mentioned this at some point during the main podcast, but I live in Georgia outside of Atlanta. Um, I have a wife and two stepchildren who are very supportive of me. My family, immediate family, is all nearby within, I would say, a total of 45 minutes radius from each other. So it's like hop, skip, and a jump. So I enjoy spending time around them. And I enjoy having discussions with them over all things. My parents, uh, they were married, and so they just reached, this year will be 53 years, I believe. So these are some of the things that I pull from in life in general, but as well as in my marriage, because having a good foundation sometimes can help somebody um, to kind of stand strong and be sturdy and all that, all the other descriptive words that I could say. Um, Again, I may have mentioned some of this, but I just wanted to have a separate segment set aside to kind of delve a little bit deeper because I know I'm probably all over the place in the main pod. Um, Again, into sports, I don't consider myself a political scientist, but I do pay attention to politics, and I definitely have opinions on the things that I see happening and the things I see not happening. I care about not just in my own vicinity, but around the world, like what's going on in the Congo, what's going on in the Middle East. We've been saying peace in the Middle East since, again, I'm an 80s and 90s baby, since the 80s and hip hop and rap. Peace in the Middle East. You know, they would say that at the end of the videos and stuff. So these are some of the things that I can uh, draw from, and some of the things that have shaped me. And again, I'm not going to say my age, but 80s and 90s, that kind of gives it away. But the first news story that I can remember uh, vividly was the Iran Contra scandal, and then into the Ollie North hearings. And going back to the theme of this particular episode, um, I remember them. There weren't very many networks at the time, so it was local news, and I don't even remember if CNN. CNN may have existed back then, and I used to read the newspaper every day, and I would watch the news. So I would see that whole situation being characterized a certain way just through those outlets, um, and it everything that I heard made me think that there was a bad situation, obviously, and I think it turned out to be bad anyway. And it was interesting how some of that, and then leading into, like I said, I used to read the newspaper every day, how I would start to notice things in the newspaper, certain descriptors when certain stories were happening, that didn't really give me the story. It gave me the writer's opinion of the story. And again, going back to the point of this episode, I'm trying to get away from that. I want to get more to what are the facts, but these are some of the things that kind of shaped my perception of things. So, um, hopefully, I'll be able to do a segment like this every episode, um, kind of to sum up whatever the episode is or whatever the talking point is in the episode. And I think we'll call it "What Am I Thinking?" Going with the whole keen intuition uh, theme. Yeah, silly, but sometimes you gotta be silly. So, what am I thinking? I think we'll go with that. Thanks again. With the keen intuition. With the keen intuition. Thank you for coming back to the Keen Intuition podcast. And again, I appreciate you joining us. And again, before the break, I said I was going to get into an admission and a request. Again, since this is my first podcast and I'm just giving myself an introduction, the first admission is something I alluded to earlier, which is, unfortunately, and people who know me can attest to this 100%, I do tend to ramble. I do tend to over explain. I do tend to speak in metaphor, and that's only to make the topics that are at hand more understandable and digestible. So please, hopefully in the comments, y'all ain't going to flame me up or anything, but definitely let me know if I'm going too far or not going enough. And that's the other thing. Sometimes even though I do tend to ramble, I do also sometimes oversimplify things sometimes and that's out of me taking for granted that everybody else already knows what I'm talking about. So hopefully I won't do that too much. But again, be sure in the comments to let me know if I end up doing that. So I am absolutely working on that, but I've been saying that for like 20 years. So, here we are. Hopefully y'all can bear with me through that process because I want this to be a safe haven for everybody to be able to dive in and enjoy and just feel good about the items that are being put forth and being presented. So again, that's my admission. So my request kind of goes back to what I was saying before as well with this whole social media and news outlets and all that kind of stuff. My request is for people who are watching this to help me out. And I know some of y'all might not see this when I post this, it is October 2025. So I'll be posting this early October. Some of y'all might not see this until December or next March or whatever. I don't really care when you see it. Well, I do because I want y'all to see it now. But, regardless of when y'all actually see it, and by the way, irregardless is not a word. Irregardless? Anyway, regardless of when y'all actually see it, I still want to make this request because it'll still be pertinent, 5 years from now. Basically, it is that one of the things that really drives me crazy is my quest to find factual and unbiased details whenever a news event happens. Now, that pertains to sporting events, that pertains to political events, that pertains to climate situations, that even pertains to, there could be an accident around the corner, but somebody looking out of their house has a different point of view than somebody who is standing right there next to it. And an analogy that I like to use, and again, I like to ramble, is when I was in college, I was a film student, and one of the classes we took centered around documentary films. And my question pertaining to that subject was always, how accurate can a documentary be? Now, if you have somebody putting a documentary together, then, if they're good, they're trying to get as much detail and as much depth and as much substance as possible to include in the finished product so that they can tell a full story and have the story be fleshed out to the point that the viewer is able to, you know, feel like they really uh, taken in a body of work that doesn't leave them with too many questions, unless the point is to leave them with questions, because we have those kind of things too, like who killed JFK, or that kind of thing. I mean, I guess they know who killed him, but some of the circumstances around it, and the what was it, the Zapruder films and the angles and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Um, my point was always that once you, and this is from the standpoint of documentary films, also let me reiterate that, once you put something on film and put it inside of that box, you immediately take away some of the objectivity that comes along with the process inherently, because you immediately lose things like uh, what did the air feel like? How did it smell? What angle were you looking from? What's happening behind me? What's happening behind the subject? What's happening on the sides? How many people are actually there? Yeah, I can tell you, there were 15 witnesses, but can I look around and see all of their faces and their facial expressions? And some people are like, yeah, get them, or whatever the case is. You take away some of the objectivity and make it subjective to whoever is doing uh, the filming, and then who's ever telling the story. So again, that relates back to my request, because what I would like for y'all to do is give me some suggestions of non-biased news sources and outlets, whether it be in print, on TV, on the internet. Like, I want to be able to see what are the facts. I don't want to see somebody's opinion of what happened. I don't want to read where they're using extra descriptive words. Like, if there's a robbery that happens, I don't want to hear there was a brazen attempt at a robbery. I want to hear this robbery happened and such and such, whatever the details are after that. I don't want to hear descriptive words that already lead me into thinking a certain way about things. I know that's difficult, because when I'm on social media or when I watch the news on TV, you don't really see a lot of instances where they don't do that. That's on both sides of the aisle. So that example that I had happened, a couple of weeks ago, or last week, I should say, with the government shutdown. Um, all the conservative media outlets said, this is the liberals' fault. Democrats they want to give free health care to illegal immigrants. All the liberal outlets were basically saying Republicans are shutting needy people out and cutting off benefits to actual Americans. What is the actual thing? Because if you make a statement like they want to give free health care to immigrants, what section in which document and on which page and in which section does it state that? And I know that you can take certain portions of it and add conjecture to it and kind of blow up a comment like to make it make sense in your narrative or whatever. But where does it specifically state we want to give free benefits to illegal aliens from the conservative side? And from the Democrat side, where does it specifically say we're cutting such and such dollars of benefits or healthcare costs with the Affordable Care Act, the subsidies that go along with that? Where exactly does it say that? Because both of those things might not be able to be true at the same time, or both of them might be able to be true at the same time. But my thing is, where does it actually say that? And I realize that we're not always privy to the documentation and stuff that they are sharing with each other in the debates that are going back and forth in the House and the Senate as they're trying to figure out what to pass and not to pass and all that kind of stuff. So, but again, when you receive the information about it from a media source or a person who has an agenda and a viewpoint already going into it, that's where it kind of messes it up for me. So again, my request is, are there any news outlets that actually are not biased and that will present the actual facts? Because that's kind of what I want to see. And the unfortunate thing too is, because I don't get to see a lot of that, I tend to go more to the satirical shows in order to get most of my news. Um, the Daily Show, the Have I Got News for You, the John Oliver, the Stephen Colbert, and all that kind of stuff. And the problem with that is, even though I enjoy a lot of their takes, all of those shows I just mentioned they lean liberal, of course. So they do kind of go through all out throughout the spectrum. Like, they're not above criticizing Biden when he was president, for instance, but they lean liberal. So that's problematic, because I don't even want to get one-sided from that, even though I consider myself a moderate who leans slightly liberal, because I appreciate policy and opinions that come out of both sides. It's just that most of them, for me, probably are a little bit more liberal, because I'm a little bit more with uh, helping people, as opposed to being uh, more conservative and thrifty. I'm a little less thrifty than some people are when it comes to overall government. So I don't know how else to explain that. Like, um, for instance, one of the things on the conservative side that I did agree with had to do with trans athletes in sports. I think trans people should be able to play and all that kind of stuff, but I do think it's unfair when someone who's born as a male ends up playing with females or whatever. And you can say what you want to say about hormones and the processes that they're going through and all that kind of stuff, but that is one thing I did actually agree with them with. I didn't think it was as big a deal as they made it, because I think there was like maybe one or two instances, a handful, I should say, probably more than one or two, but definitely less than 10, where something was actually happening. And they were kind of pulling those out and acting like it was the norm. And again, that's where the bias comes from, because they're creating a hysteria over something that really has not been as big an issue as they're making it. So, I mean, I'm sure it was big for the people involved, but all across the board, it wasn't as big a deal as they made it seem. So, again, nothing against the trans people. I probably know some and don't even know it, but they do deserve to be able to do the things that the other kids do. But again, it to me, it makes it unfair if you were born a certain way and end up playing with people whose body makeup disallows them to be on the same field as you. But yeah, that's that. So that's a conservative thing that I agree with. One of the liberal things that I agree with is, as far as the social programs, like there's been a lot of discussion over places like Chicago and Memphis and going all the way back to DC, where they want to send troops in so they could stand around and look like clowns, I guess. But to me, you need a balanced approach between law enforcement and programs that will help keep these kids, I don't want to put it exactly like this, but really take away some of their free time, because I feel like the studies show that when people have free time and nothing to do, there's one of two or three things that they'll do: get pregnant, get into drug habits, or get into mischief. And the drug and mischief part is what the law enforcement is trying to stop, which I agree with, it should stop, but it needs to be a balance, because a lot of times if these kids and adults had something better to do, something positive, then they would not go down that route, or would be less likely to go down that route. So then you need less law enforcement because less people committing crimes and blah 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 blah. It's like a big cycle and a snowball effect. And then the other part of that, so that's a liberal thing that I agree with. So another part of that too is the way that conservative media has shaped the narrative for that is that they act like people in those communities don't care or don't want to do anything about the violence and all that stuff that's going on. And I disagree with that completely. Like, there's literally a protest that went down. I forget what city it was. I probably need to check my notes for that. But I haven't heard a protest against crime in that city. I haven't seen it reported on any network, not just conservatives, but any network. But stuff like that is happening. You could go all the way back to, I'm an 80s and 90s baby, even though I didn't say my age. So you could go all the way back to self-destruction in the hip-hop, Heal Yourself, like hip-hop, we're all in the same gang, hip-hop collectives getting together and getting their We Are the World on, but from the standpoint of violence and gang violence and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, I'm going to cut that short because, like I said earlier, sometimes I ramble, and I am rambling. So getting back to the earlier point, I do tend to drift towards the more satirical takes on things, because if you're going to get bad after bad, I want to at least infuse a little humor into it to make it a little bit more palatable. And that's not necessarily a good thing because, again, I want the news straight to news. And the minute you start being sarcastic with it, you're automatically injecting some kind of a, maybe not even bias, but you're injecting something into it that makes you think about it differently. So, and most of those end up being liberal leaning because, to be honest with you, I don't see a lot of, I haven't seen a lot of conservatives be funny in that way. And I know I mentioned those liberal leaning shows earlier, but I know one conservative leaning one is, I want to say Gutfeld on, I want to say Fox. And I couldn't even get through an episode of that because it's like, what are you even talking about? So, but again, I want to bring it to where everything is being presented in a more, in a less nuanced way, or maybe I got that backward, more nuanced, because sometimes there is nuance needed in order to explain a situation, but you can do that without putting a slant on it, if that makes sense. So anyways, I'm going to wrap this up now. This is, again, my first show, and hopefully if you're still with me, y'all will be able to help me out by giving me some outlets that I can go to in order to, get the details, the facts, nothing but the facts. So in the next coming weeks, I will be looking up some topics that I can talk through, and my intent is to get information on those topics so that I'm not just talking based on a headline like you see on a lot of sites, and getting to the actual detail that's behind it in order to bring some sense into the whole thing. So in closing, I'd like to say thanks again for joining the Keen Intuition Show. Thanks for your support now and for any that you give in the future. And one thing I always say is, if you didn't hear it directly from me, then there's a good chance that I probably didn't actually say it. On that note, see you next time.